Hello, I'd like to welcome you to our Fireside chat for January of 2023. This is the first one of the year. I'm glad to have you back. For those of you that are new to the Fireside chat, this is a little thing that we do every month to accompany the Design of Experiments MOOC that I run on Coursera. And as I said, we do this every month. We have a guest speaker. And we talk about certain topics, sometimes very specific detailed topics and applications of design of experiments. We always have some time for questions at the end of this. And this is a great time for you to ask questions either about the course itself or something that our guest has talked about, or some specific problem or situation that you're talking about or that you're working with that you'd like some advice about. We do record these and they are posted in Coursera. They're in the resources tab of your course. And there's a whole list of these out there. And I would strongly encourage you to take a look at some of the previous Fireside chats, because there's a lot of really interesting speakers and a lot of really interesting topics. Quick reminder, please keep your microphones muted and your cameras off during the session so that we don't have any sort of freaky noise sneaking in or any other disturbances that might interrupt the program. If you want to submit a question to either me or the guest, the way to do that is to use the chat function in the Zoom menu bar. And you don't need to wait until the Q&A session begins. You can actually feel free to put that in anytime during the session. And if we don't get your question answered during this time, we'll try to respond to that in Coursera for those that are enrolled in the course. So our guest today is Dr. Brad Jones. And Brad is a return guest. He's been here before. And so you may have, if you've been to the previous Fireside chats, you may have heard all about him before, but he is a distinguished research fellow in the JMP Statistical Discovery Organization, where he's basically responsible for a lot of the new technology that comes down the road in design of experiments. He built the JMP Custom Designer, which is a very powerful way to create optimal designs. He has a patent on the use of experimental design and minimizing registration errors in manufacturing printed circuit boards, and a dozen other patents for innovation in design and experiments. He's the inventor of the prediction profile plot in JMP, which is an extremely valuable tool for the exploration of multiple input and output response surfaces. Brad is the discoverer, along with Christopher Nachsheim of the University of Minnesota, of definitive screening designs, which is one of the most powerful ideas that's come down the road in experimental design in the last 10, 15 years. He's a co-author of a couple of books with Peter Guss. He wrote Optimal Design of Experiments, a case study approach that won the 2012 Ziegel Prize. And he and I have co-authored a book, Design of Experiments, a Modern Approach, which was recently published by Wiley. He's received a lot of awards for his work. He's won the Brumbaugh Award 3 times. He's a recipient of the Lloyd Nelson Award for the article that has the greatest immediate impact to practitioners twice. He's received the Statistics in Chemistry Award from the American Statistical Association. He's won the Uden Prize of Technometrics for the best expository paper in that journal. And he won the 2021 Hunter Award and the 2022 Shewart Medal from the American Society for Quality. He is a former editor of the Journal of Quality Technology. He's a fellow of the American Statistical Association. And I am really, really pleased to have him here as a guest. And I'm also very proud of having been a collaborator with him, not only on a textbook, but on other journal articles and projects as well. So I'd like to welcome Brad to our Fireside chat. And Brad, we're going to turn this over to you whenever we're ready to go here.
So I should share my screen at this point?
I think so.
Okay, okay, so I'm going to have two different programs that are part of this talk. I'll do a PowerPoint presentation, but I also will be demonstrating the way JMP supports marketing preference studies, which is the topic for today. I'm going to talk about two different kinds of studies, MaxDiff experiments and discrete choice experiments. I know that there's a very popular new, well, not particularly new, but anyway, hot topic, which is A/B testing that happens with online kinds of tests of generally landing pages for people's web pages. Those A/B studies are basically the way you create them is using the same kind of tools as you would that Doug talks about in the rest of his course. These other two things I'm going to talk about today are specialized kinds of experiments that require more heavy-duty technical tools. So,
yeah, Brad, we've actually had a guest that has talked about A/B testing. So if people want to find out more about that, they can go back into the Fireside Chat repertoire and find that.
Well, that's good. Then I don't feel guilty at all about not talking about it.
Okay.
Okay. Well, moving along. Let me first talk about MaxDiff experiments. What they're for is to compare a whole bunch of competing products that already exist. And the idea is to find the most preferred and the least preferred product in the group of products. And the MaxDiff experiment orders the products from the best to the worst, and also gives you a notion of the probability if you were faced with, let's say, a counter full or a display full of these products, which one you would be most likely to pick versus the others. So let's imagine that we have 21 different products to compare. If you asked a random person to rank these products from best to worst, that's a hard task. That presents any respondent a big cognitive burden. So instead of doing that, what the MaxDiff experiment does is it presents a smaller number of products, let's say 5 at a time, but it could be 3, it could be 4, it could be 6. That's a little bit arbitrary. It just depends on how hard you want to make the problem for the respondent. In this case, this is actually related to a consulting project that I had with a marketing consultant, and what he had was you know these gift cards that you can buy in a grocery store or some other kinds of stores where you can put money on them and then you give them to somebody as a present, and that way you don't actually have to buy them a present. They get to buy whatever they want that the card will allow them to buy. So in this study, we actually had 105 of these gift cards to compare. And what we did was we divided all 105 into 5 groups of 21 products. And for each product, each group of products, we did a MaxDiff experiment where we presented 5 of the 21 products to each respondent at a time. And what they had to do was pick the product they thought was the best of the 5 and the product they thought was the worst of the 5. And then they repeated that job 21 times with different groups of 5. Where the group of 5 that was chosen is chosen by the design, the MaxDiff design approach. And in order to get a balanced incomplete block design, which is something that it would be perfect for this kind of experiment, you would have to do that 21 times. But making best and worst choices of 5 products 21 times is not as hard actually as trying to rank the 21 products all at once. And in fact, it's also less prone to error. So now I'm going to move over to JMP and give you a demo showing what happened when my collaborator and I did this experiment. So here's the result of, can you see my this JMP table?
Yeah, it's kind of small, but I can see it.
Yeah, it's, I don't know, what you might notice here is this 100,695 rows in this table. If I click this green triangle there, it will go out and do the analysis that would give you the list of products, but that takes a little time. So instead of that, I'm just going to show you the profiler of the probability for the various cards. So this shows the probability that any one of these individual cards will get chosen. And the best one is this new card called from giftcards.com. The next best is a Visa gift card where you basically give them a card that they can use in Visa to buy anything they want. So those are by far the most preferred cards of the list of 21. Now I want to talk a little bit about how you would create a design using JMP for this problem. So here's a list of all 21 cards that I just showed you. And if I go to DOE, one of the choices in JMP is consumer studies. So these are the 2 tools, choice design and MaxDiff design, that JMP is supporting for doing marketing studies. And what we want is the MaxDiff design. So the table here is showing all the competitive products, and they're all cards. So if I just, that's the factor. And then I click OK, and it goes and it finds a balanced incomplete block design with 5 profiles in each choice set. That is, each respondent will see groups of 5 cards, and then and they pick the best and the worst of those 5, and then in this choice they would do that 21 times. Now there are other possibilities, and for instance, you could say 6 or 7 here. You can fool around with this, but this particular choice is the default choice, and that's because it can allow you to create a perfect design. So here's the design, and it shows choice sets going from the first choice set, which has the cards Happy Dad, Happy Birthday, Happy Holidays green, Giving Good, Make-A-Wish, and Happy Holidays red. So so the respondent would have to pick the best one of these, like maybe Giving Good, so that's supposed to be helping the world in some way. And then they will have to go through all 21 in order to in order to finish the survey. This shows the pairwise incidence matrix, and it shows that every card is being chosen at least once. And if I make the table here, basically what a user would do is they put a 1 in the choice that they like the most, and a 0 for the ones that aren't chosen, and a -1 where for the least favorable one. And you give these this to a whole bunch of random respondents that you usually have to pay some amount of money to get them to take a survey. And then in the case that I showed you at the very beginning, there were over 1,000 different respondents, and that's what allowed us to get very powerful estimates of the probability that a given respondent would, well, any particular respondent would choose a particular card. But another part of this study is that people often supply demographic information about themselves, like whether they're single or married, whether they're a man or a woman, whether what kind of work they do, and so forth. And it's sometimes the case that depending on demographics, you have multiple markets where one kind of person would choose one kind of card, and a different kind of person would choose a different kind of card. So this kind of thing can also be built into the analysis. I didn't show that. I avoided that complication, but it's possible to do. So now let me go back to my JMP presentation. That's all I have on MaxDiff studies.
By the way, what was the worst card?
Oh, I didn't.
Yeah, I didn't get a good look at the profiler.
Okay, let's.
Sorry about that.
So the worst card was Happy Eats.
Ah.
And the next to the worst heart card was Happy Dad. So.
Okay.
So, dad's shit out of luck here.
Yeah.
All right. So the next kind of experiment I'm going to talk about is discrete choice experiments. And those kinds of experiments are substantially more complicated than a MaxDiff experiment. Because in a discrete choice experiment, what you're trying to do is choose which of several, you might have several different features that you're thinking about, but the features can be implemented in different ways. So that's one part. And then another part is you might be offering various features for a price, and you want to know the willingness to pay that a user has, so you alter the price points. So just to give you an example, I've given this talk before of several years ago, so these computers are kind of look pretty stupid at this point, but I didn't want to have to completely redo the presentation, so I left it. Anyway, nowadays hard drives are a lot bigger than 40 or 80 gigabytes, but you can just add another 0 and that'll be about right. So you might be considering hard drives of different sizes to put in a new laptop that you're going to market. They might have different processor speeds. They might have different battery life depending on how good the battery you put into it. And then there's the price that they're willing to pay. So obviously, a computer company is not going to offer generally the best options for hard drive speed and battery life at the lowest price, because then they wouldn't make any money. And also they won't present that particular choice to a user because it won't give any information. Everybody's going to choose the best possible choice. So you want to present alternatives to people that make it at least not obvious how they would respond. So here's an example. You're asking in this choice set, there are two different possible computers. Both of them have the same hard disk size, so that wouldn't allow you to choose between them. But the first one has a battery life that's 6 hours compared to the other one, which is 4 hours, and the price is lower, but the speed is only 3/4 as fast. So somebody, every respondent who sees this choice set has to choose either the first one or the second one. Now, I happen to do a lot of traveling to Europe, and and while I'm on the plane, I like to use my computer because I can't ever sleep as I'm flying across the ocean. So I need a battery that lasts longer, and that's the most important criterion for me. So I would choose box number one. Other people might choose box number one because of the lower price. But somebody who really is doing a lot of heavy duty computing might want to choose the second one because of the speed. As you bring a lot of respondents into one of these choice experiments, and you present them a lot of pairs of profiles to choose from, you can, the software and the methodology allows you to determine what features are most important at what levels, and can give you a probability that a given prospective product, even though it hasn't been built yet, is likely to please the market or a market segment. And again, the same kind of thing occurs here. People generally who are taking these discrete choice experiments have to give a lot of demographic information, and there are certain times when men will have different views about what they would want than women, for instance. So in a discrete choice setup, respondents look at choice sets, and what we saw in this slide here is one choice set where there are two products to choose from. The alternatives in a choice set are called profiles. It's a profile in a choice set is like a run or and a choice set is like a block. And then each profile is a combination of attribute levels, and the attributes in this case are the hard disk, the speed, the battery, and the price. So attribute in choice experiment talk is like a factor. And choice sets generally have 2, 3, or 4 profiles. The more profiles you have, the harder the cognitive burden becomes, and people start answering randomly instead of paying attention to the profile. So you want to make the choice a little bit hard, but not too hard, if that makes sense. So here's some math. The model that is used to fit these kinds of experiments is called the multinomial logit model, because often you have, instead of just two, you have multiple choices within each choice set. And the idea behind the model is that the utility that a user gives to a particular choice that they might make is a linear combination of the attributes that they're considering. And so you sum up their choice is going to be a weighted sum of the utilities that they assigned to each one of the attributes in a choice set. So the probability that you choose option J in a choice set. So if you have two alternatives in a choice set, J is either 1 or 2. But if you had 3, it would be 1, 2, or 3. Anyway, it's this exponential, the exponential of the given choice over the sum over all the possibilities. So that's the explanation of the model. And the criterion that we use to determine whether a design X is good is to look at the information matrix and of the design X and the set of parameters beta, and take the determinant of that matrix. So we want to maximize the determinant of the information matrix or minimize the determinant of the variance matrix. Those are two equivalent choices. And those are the same kinds of choices that you would make in creating an optimal design. That's what the software is doing behind the scenes. But creating an optimal design for a linear model, a model that's linear in the betas, is a lot simpler than finding a design for a model where the information that you get out of a particular design is not only a function of the design, but a function of the unknown betas. So here is the form of the information matrix of a discrete choice experiment, and it depends on what you don't know, because you're doing the whole experiment to find out what beta is. So how are you supposed to guess? How are you supposed to design an experiment when you don't know the thing that you want to know in order to get a good design? So there are lots of ways that people do that. One choice is to pretend that none of the products make any difference to anybody. That's called the utility neutral experiment. And it's obviously a really stupid assumption to make, that nobody cares about anything. If that were the case, then why would you do the experiment at all? But if you make the assumption that assumption, then this stops being a function of beta, and it turns into just the normal, everyday optimal design that all software can do that supports the optimal design of experiments. But again, you have to accept an assumption that doesn't make any sense. Another thing that people have done in the past is they make a guess about what beta might be. They have some feelings about the relative importance of the parameters. So let's go back to our example here. We know for sure that as the price increases, the utility of a choice will decrease. So that parameter has to be negative. And whereas that parameter has to be positive. Increasing the speed, that parameter has to be positive. And increasing the hard disk size, that parameter also has to be positive. Now you might have some feelings about which of these things is more important to a user than others. If you're like me, I would say, well, the battery life is more important. So I would make its guessed parameter bigger than the other two in magnitude. But those are all guesses that you would have to make, and so that kind of choice is sometimes done, but whether you get a good design by making a arbitrary choice of beta depends on how close the choice that you made of beta is to the true value of beta. So if your choice of beta was really far off from the truth, the design that you create might not be very good for discriminating between various attributes that you're trying to understand. So for nonlinear models that are nonlinear in the parameters, and the utility estimator that I showed you is clearly nonlinear with all these exponentials. You have to know something about the response function and about the parameter values, and so you have a chicken and egg problem. You don't know what the parameters are, but you have to have some kind of information about them in order to make a good design. So another way that people have done this is by taking advantage of the idea of a Bayesian approach to design. So in this case, you don't know the parameter vector, but you could say, well, I think that my set of parameters, this one parameter might fall between these two values, and this other parameter might fall between another set of values. And you could say, well, I believe that my vector of parameters is distributed as a normal distribution with some mean and some variance. And if you make the variance larger, that means that you have more uncertainty about your knowledge of beta, which will give you less. It will give you less information about any particular beta, but it gives you also more safety, because if your mean and variance, if your variances are big, that means that you're likely to have your prior density or prior distribution contain the true parameter. So there's a trade-off there. So what the Bayesian design does is it looks at the log of the determinant of the information over and integrates it over the density that you've chosen as a prior density for the parameters. And so that integral has to be solved every time you change anything in creating an algorithm for optimizing a design for a nonlinear model. So that was a major impediment to doing the optimal designs in a Bayesian fashion, because most of the time what people did was they tried to integrate this density using a Monte Carlo draw of maybe several thousand attributes from the prior distribution, and then evaluating the determinant for all those draws and summing them up, and that sum ends up being the approximation to the integral. But calculating all 1,000 determinants of a matrix is going to take especially back when Bayesian d-optimal designs for this problem got started, that computers were a lot slower, and so creating a design for this kind of problem, even a fairly simple problem, could take hours. And if you're doing a design experiment, every time you change something in the design, you have to go through the entire process again. So to get to the optimal design, you have to make this many changes to get there. So the primary problem in doing this was for much of the early, like, first 20 years that this happened, was trying to speed up the process of actually creating the design. So I'm going to break my arm patting myself on the back, but I wrote a paper with Chris Gottwald and David Steinberg in 2007 to vastly reduce the amount of computation necessary to integrate one of these things. And instead of having to do 1,000 choices of information matrix from a random sample inside of the density function, you only had to do enough evaluations as the square of the number of parameters that you were trying to estimate. So in this problem, we only have 4 parameters. So instead of having to do 1,000 determinants, we'd have to do something that was just a product of 16 evaluations. So much fewer. So in this quadrature approach, we do assume that the prior is normal and that the parameters are independent of each other. And we center the integral around the prior mean, and then we scale each variable by its standard deviation. And the integration is over a spherical shell, and that ends up being fairly simple, and it's embedded in the JMP software, but it didn't exist until about 15 years ago. So that you don't need to see. But this shows you for exactly how many points you need for a given number of parameters. And basically, in 2 dimensions, what you need is a simplex, and then the midpoints of the simplex on the sphere. So that would be the whole full design for looking at a problem where there were only 2 attributes, for instance. So in this example that I'm going to do, I considered I had 16 respondents that were members of the development and sales and marketing teams at JMP. So there were 8 developers and 8 people from sales and marketing. So those are my one demographic variable was, are developers different from sales and marketing people in their choices of a computer, a laptop. And then I had 9 male respondents and 7 female respondents. So I created 2 surveys and randomly gave one of the 2 surveys to every respondent. There were 6 choice sets in each survey. So this is the utility that came out of this study. So it was, if we look at the hard disk here, you can see that the effect of increasing the hard disk was the biggest effect for of the 4 effects, and price. There was a certain amount of insensitivity to the price between $1,000 and $1,200, but when you got to $1,500, that really knocked down the utility. And then it turned out that gender was important, and changing the gender changes the slopes of these curves. So let me show you this in JMP. So here's the setup. I have a hard disk which is categorical with 40 gig and 80 gig. The processor speed 1.5 gigahertz and 2 gigahertz. Battery life 4 hours or 6 hours, and price $1,500, $1,200, and 1,000. And then I guess this is my guess at the prior mean, and these are my guesses at the prior variances, and this is the choices that I made about how many attributes were allowed to change within a choice set, how many profiles there were in a choice set, the number of choice sets per survey, and the number of surveys. So that's the information that was fed into the designer. Here are my factors in a JMP table. There's a choice design setup again. Here's my profile table, and the actual runs, where these are the people in JMP who took this choice set, or who took this survey of for the laptops. So and then so what I want to do is, if I just run this, it's going to fit the model, assuming that there's no demographic effect. And so this is the kind of marginal thing that's independent of demographics. And the hard disk is clearly the most important. And it looks like for my group of users, the battery life was the least important thing. So I didn't like to see that. But here's the analysis with the demographic effect of gender included. So it turns out that it mattered whether you were a male or a female. So you can see this is the profile for a person if they are female, and if I change that to male, you can see that the hard disk is a lot more important. You can see the slope is much bigger for females than it is for males. So it means that females liked bigger hard disks than males did. I guess males were less sensitive to price than females were. And you can see that this is a little bit odd looking, because you would expect that the utility of a $1,200 machine is going to be less than a $1,000 machine, but this is the result of randomness in the among the users. But I mean, you can make assumptions about why it is that women prefer hard drives, bigger hard drives than men, and I'm not going to go there, but it does mean that you might market to women differently. You might do a different kind of ad campaign for women than you do for men. So going back to my slideshow, so this is the result of having actually done a choice experiment with my own colleagues. Since there were only 16 people, the uncertainties around all these things was very large. Generally, you would want several hundred people, but even with only 16 people, there was useful and interesting information. So, if you're going to do discrete choice conjoint experiments, you have to have be able to handle design from nonlinear models, and that's way more complicated than the typical design that one does in industry, where the model is empirical and thought to be linear in the parameters. But using Bayesian designs makes the dependence on the design less strong than if you were to choose what's called a locally optimal design, which is the design that you create when you guess the parameter vector, or utility neutral design, which is where you not only guess the parameter, but you say that the coefficients are all zero. But the new methods of doing this, approximating the integral that's involved, makes the computation of these designs much faster. And of course, JMP has that built in to the software for creating discrete choice designs. And here are a bunch of references. The one that I talked about got published. I said it was in 2007. That's when we were doing the research. It took 2 years for it to get accepted. So that there's some time lag. That's just the nature of the beast with publishing. And that is what I have for you today.
Brad, thank you very much. This is really quite interesting. I do have a question before we get to the audience questions, but my question is, what's your sense of how widely these types of experiments are used in product development, marketing, research, the kinds of applications of like the computer example that you presented? Are these do you think these are fairly widely used?
I think that they are more widely used now than they were 10 years ago. I keep seeing application papers coming up of this methodology. Generally, those papers are written by professors, and they're in collaboration with some colleague at a university. The ones that are being done in industry are generally not published because Macy's doesn't tell Gimbals. So
Yeah, a lot of, I would think that a lot of the results would be very proprietary, and you'd be reluctant to publish, but you're out and about with a lot of people that use design, and I just wondered what your sense of usage was.
well, my sense of usage is that if people who really want to understand are about to make a big bet on a product and want to understand what features are most important, are going to use discrete choice designs.
Yeah.
And the consultant who did the study on the gift cards, that project was sponsored by the maker of the gift cards, and what they wanted was to lighten their load of gift cards that they were offering to people, because they thought it had gotten out of hand. So, and the result of this, the study cost quite a bit to run, with hundreds of users going through a survey process, and yet the value of the study was a huge increase in the profitability of the cards that they were putting out. So the study really paid for itself in a big way.
And I would think the same thing would be true about the discrete choice examples, because you may be talking about building a product that's going to be on the market for maybe several years. And
that's exactly true.
And if it's going to, and you know, if you're putting a bomb out there, you know, it's going to have a huge negative impact on your corporation's profitability. And so spending the time and the money to do one of these experiments, even though it could be expensive, I would think it'd be worth it. So I would think a lot of folks would be getting interested in this. And, you know, the other type of market experiment, the A/B type testing, I know more about that, and have been involved in some of that. And that's, of course, getting used a lot.
So A/B testing, you know, and the designs that are used to do A/B testing, especially when it's not just two things, it's a whole series of things that you're trying to compete with each other.
Right.
Those designs are essentially making the utility neutral assumption.
Right.
And that can be problematic, but you can get so many people to take those studies, when they're being fielded by Google or Amazon, you don't even know that you're being experimented on.
That's right.
So they have the benefit of getting a whole bunch of data, but it might be time sensitive, and they don't have any idea of whether they have any kind of random sample of a population. So
Right.
there are issues.
It's a big sample size, but you know, it as I've often said, all a large random sample does, or a large non-random sample does, is it allows you to calculate the wrong answer to a higher level of precision. and there's always that risk, right?
That's so true.
There's always that risk. Well, I greatly appreciate your spending the time to do this. We do have some questions, and we have a few minutes. We have about 10 minutes where we can maybe address some of these. So would you like to move on to the questions?
Sure.
Okay. So here is one that's up on the screen, and it came from the chat. And it says, I'm interested in Monte Carlo's approach, and where can I find more information about it? Well, Monte Carlo methods covers a big waterfront, don't you think?
Yeah. So, yeah, there are all kinds of ways that Monte Carlo is used.
Right.
You know, when we write papers, we often do a Monte Carlo study of the performance of a statistical method, for instance.
Right.
And there's actually, statistics grad students should have an entire course on how to do good simulation, and particularly learning about how to perform Monte Carlo studies. So it's a non-answer. It's not a question that can be answered in a short period of time.
No, but one place to start would be to look at discrete event simulation courses perhaps as a starting point, because the Monte Carlo technique is underlies of discrete event simulations.
Built into that, but that's just one specific example.
That's right.
Monte Carlo.
But that would maybe be a place to start, because there are a lot of those simulation courses around.
Yeah, and especially important for IE students.
Yes, engineering students, business students, understanding discrete event simulation is a big. It's a big thing. You really need to understand that.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's an interesting question. How Taguchi is different from the CCD or the Box-Benken designs. So, well, we could talk for hours about this, but basically Taguchi recommended using designs that he called orthogonal array designs, and they're fractional factorials. They're usually very low resolution fractional factorials, a lot of aliasing of main effects and two-factor interactions. And some of his designs incorporate multiple levels, 2-level factors and 3-level factors. I guess my feeling is that Taguchi was trying to attack a different problem. I think of what he was trying to do as more screening than optimization, whereas CCDs and Box-Benken designs are focused more on optimization as an objective. I think that the Taguchi orthogonal arrays are not necessarily always good choices of designs. I think if you're interested in doing screening designs and you have everything at either 2 levels or 3 levels or mixtures of 2 and 3 levels, there are other design approaches that are better choices. Brad,
I have one thing that I could say in support of Taguchi, which is that before Taguchi, primarily people were concerned about controlling the mean of a process.
Yeah.
And they wanted to put the mean on target. But that's not necessarily all that great if the variability of the process at the choice that you made for the mean is very large. You could still be generating product that's out of spec.
right.
So what Taguchi did was he made variance a response, and that was a good idea. His approach to how to make variance a response was less than optimal.
Yeah.
But the idea of considering variance as part of the thing that you were caring about in an experiment was right on the money.
Yeah, I give him great credit for getting the problem right. As a friend of mine who was a research physician with the CDC told me once years ago, he said, Doug, he said, how do you become famous in academic medicine? I said, well, how? He said, you discover a new disease, and right away it becomes Montgomery's syndrome. Okay, you've discovered a new disease. He said, discovering a new cure doesn't necessarily do it for you, because everybody fights and argues about the effectiveness of the cure for years and years and years, and you're dead before it's ever accepted. He said, give me an example of a physician whose cure became famous in his lifetime. And I said, Jonas Salk. And he said, that's one. He said, you got another one? and I was stumped. He was right. You know, it's
Well,
so,
to his point, there's a guy who discovered the cure for scurvy, who's a
that's true.
British
That's true.
British sea captain.
That's right.
And exactly what you just described happened.
Yep.
There was a lot of controversy about, get vitamin C, and it was decades before people started doing the giving oranges to sailors routinely as a way to avoid scurvy.
The cure, he was long dead before the cure was recognized, and that happens a lot. So here's another one. It says the choice analysis is similar to methods used in sensory analysis, such as 2AFC, two choice, forced choice. Does JMP support many sensory methods? And this is a class of technique that I'm not very familiar with. So I'm going to ask you to take a shot at this. Could you do something like this in JMP?
Well, since JMP has a programming language, you can do anything.
Well,
but,
yeah.
Having something built in, JMP is more or less a generic product, and so specialized tools that are unique to a particular vertical application is not in JMP's sweet spot, because JMP has methodology that's generic, not context sensitive, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and the scripting language is very powerful. A lot of my research students use the JMP scripting language because you've got all these tools built in there, and it's a matter of hooking them up together and writing a program.
And then creating interfaces using JMP scripting language is a lot easier than other languages.
Yes. Let's see. Okay, that's the end of questions. And this concludes our session today. We're going to continue our series of fireside chats. We have some really interesting guests lined up, and information about the topics and the timing is forthcoming. I'd like to thank everyone for participating, and Brad, I particularly want to thank you because you've gone to the well more than once for me as a guest, and always managed to produce a really interesting talk. And we will hopefully see people back next month for the February fireside chat.
Thank you.